Deku led you up the stairs to his room, the familiar scent of his mother's homemade cookies still lingering in the air from earlier. You had been to his house many times before, but each time felt like a new adventure, especially with how comfortable you felt around him. "Here we are," he said, pushing the door open with a soft grin. His room was as he remembered, a mix of organized chaos. There was piles of textbooks scattered around, but the desk was always neatly arranged, his All Might figures lined up in the shelves, and some were stacked in a way that made them look like they were mid-battle. You smiled. You'd seen him here countless times, and you never got tired of how cute it was. "All right, let's get started," Deku said, sitting down at his desk and pulling a notebook from the pile. You sat on the bed looking around the room, while you waited for him to settle into his study mode. His room had always made you feel so at ease, his presence doing the same. You reached for your own notebook, flipping it open to the chapter you'd planned to study together. You two had spent the next hour in relative silence, only the sound of pages turning and the occasional hum of Deku's thoughts breaking the quiet. You didn't mind the quiet, though, enjoying the peaceful atmosphere as you both worked. Every now and then, you glanced up to find Deku intently focused on his textbook. His brow furrowed in concentration, but his determination was something that always inspired you. "Hey, YN," he said, breaking the silence as he turned a page. "Are you okay? You've been kinda quiet." You looked up at him, slightly startled. "Oh, yeah, I'm good, just thinking." He smiled, his face lighting up. "I get that. Sometimes I zone out too when I'm trying to figure something out." A comfortable silence settled between the two of you once more, though there was something more in his eyes, a quiet curiosity. You continued studying, but your hand brushed against his on the desk a few minutes later. You didn't mean to, but the touch felt a little too close. Both of you, for a brief moment, froze. Before you could even pull your hand back, your heart skipped a beat. You cleared your throat awkwardly, trying to focus back on your work. "Sorry, I didn't mean to." "It's okay," he said. His voice was soft. "You didn't do anything wrong." You nodded, glancing over at him. His eyes were a little brighter now, though you couldn't quite pinpoint why. There was something about the way his hands fidgeted with his pen, his usual confidence slightly shaken. You continued to read, but now the air was different, charged with something unspoken. You could feel your heart beating faster, and it wasn't because of the homework. You took a slow breath, trying to steady yourself, but it wasn't easy when Deku's presence was so overwhelmed. After a few moments, your hand brushed against his again, this time closer to his thigh. You froze, unsure if it was intentional or just another accident. Your fingers hovered there for a second too long, and Deku's breath hitched, his gaze snapping to yours. "YN?" he whispered. His voice was softer now than before. His green eyes were wide with surprise. There was a flicker of something else too, something that made your pulse quicken. Without another word, you slowly slid your hand up his leg, feeling the muscles tense under your touch. Deku's breath faltered as he glanced up at you. His lips slightly parted, his eyes full of uncertainty but also longing. You couldn't help it. You leaned in closer, your lips brushing against his ear. "I don't know why, but I just want to," you murmured. He shivered under your touch, his hand reaching up to cup your face. His thumb brushed over your cheek. "YN?" His voice cracked, but before you could say anything more, he closed the distance between the two of you, capturing your lips in a soft, tentative kiss. The kiss was slow at first, hesitant, as if the both of you were just testing the waters. But as the seconds passed, the tension broke. Deku's lips moved and deepened the kiss, his hands gently moving to hold your shoulders. You reciprocated it, your hand sliding into his messy green curls as you pulled him closer, your chest pressed against his. His heartbeat raced against yours, his body was trembling with the intensity of it. You could feel his fingers brushing over the side of your neck, pulling you in even closer. The kiss grew more urgent as the minutes passed, each touch setting both through a light. Your hand began to tangle further in his hair. Your fingers were brushing against his scalp as you gave in to the overwhelming rush of emotions. You felt his breath hitched when you tugged lightly at his curls. The way he responded, softly moaning into the kiss, made your heart flutter. You pulled away just enough to catch your breath. eyes meeting his. His green eyes were filled with the warmth, and he was panting lightly, a flushed expression on his face. He looked at you, as if he couldn't quite believe what was happening. But the smile that had spread across his face told you everything you needed to know. "Ryan," he breathed out. His voice was barely above a whisper. "I wanted to do that for so long." You smiled, brushing your thumb over his cheek lightly. "Me too, Izuku." He leaned in to kiss you again, and this time there was no hesitation, no second-guessing it. Just two hearts beating as one, lost in the feeling of being each other. It was an ordinary Saturday afternoon when you found yourself visiting Izuku's house once more. You and him had made plans to study for another upcoming test, a tradition that had been quite a comfortable routine for the two of you. You would often study together for things. His mother, Inko Midoriya, was incredibly kind and welcoming whenever you came, making sure you were well taken care of with snacks and drinks and anything of the like. After knocking and hearing Izuku's voice calling out to you from upstairs, you made your way inside, feeling that familiar warmth of his house. Inko greeted you with her usual bright smile and soft-spoken charm. "Ryan, dear, it's so good to see you. How are you today?" Inko asked as she shuffled around the living room, tidying up a bit. I'm doing well, thank you, Miss Midoriya," he replied with a smile, though your nerves were starting to creep up a bit. After all, you spend a lot more time with Izuku recently, and sometimes it felt like there was unspoken things between the two of you that neither of you could quite address. "Izuku's upstairs, as always," Inko said with a light chuckle, her eyes sparkling with warmth. "You two study so much, it's so amazing. I'm sure you're going to do wonderfully on the test." You couldn't help but smile at how sweet she was. Inko's kindness always made you feel right at home, even though you were aware of the awkwardness that occasionally filled up the spaces between you and her son. It was hard to notice the glances that he gave you, or the way he became flustered in your presence, if only you could figure out what was going on inside his head. You thanked Inko and made your way upstairs, knocking softly before entering Izuku's room. There he was, hunched over his desk like usual, his focus on a pile of textbooks scattered before him. "Hey, Ryan," Izuku greeted, smiling at you warmly, though his face was flushed slightly at the sight of you. "I was just getting ready to go over the material for the next chapter. Are you ready?" You smiled back at him, already feeling the tension ease. "Yeah, I'm ready." The two of you settled into your study session, the conversation flowing between the academic topics and small talk as usual. You found yourself more at ease in Izuku's company than you had ever imagined. His gentle touch and nature, and the way he paid such close attention to you, felt like everything you needed. It made you feel comfortable despite the underlying tension that you tried to ignore. Sometimes it felt like you just had so much unspokenness between the two of you, but it remained unspoken. Meanwhile, downstairs, Inko was humming a soft tune as she continued her chores. She was tidying up the living room, folding laundry, and preparing a snack for the both of you. She was always so thoughtful. You couldn't help but appreciate how she cared for you. You and Izuku continued studying upstairs, completely unaware of what was happening downstairs. Inko had decided to do a little tidying up in her son's room. She figured she would take the opportunity to fold out some of his clothes that was left out on his bed, thinking it would help him have a clean and organized space when he came back later, making sure everything was in order for when he returned downstairs. Little did she know that the shirt in her hand wasn't just any shirt. It was a shirt that belonged to you. Back upstairs, you and Izuku were long lost in your studies, completely unaware of the small accident that happened downstairs. The two of you had settled into a rhythm, explaining different concepts to each other and occasionally glancing at your face. When you laughed or made a witty comment, his cheeks would turn red and he would quickly look away. You couldn't help but notice his nervousness around you, especially with how close you two were. It was always so obvious. You didn't know what happened, but a few accidental touches there and a lingering glance here, the atmosphere between you and Izuku shifted. The way his hand brushed against yours, the way his green eyes lingered for just a second too long. It was enough to make your pulse quicken, enough to make you second-guess your own movements. Maybe it was the way he looked at you with his lips parted. He looked at you so... you couldn't even explain it. but you felt this strange tightness in your chest, but somehow you found yourself closer than ever. Then, without really thinking, your hand moved to his thigh, brushing against the soft fabric of his pants. He froze, but it was too late. His breath caught. And before either you could say anything, the tension snapped, and you leaned in, your lips meeting his in a caress that was both tentative and full of urgency. And just like the day they first made out, Izuku responded immediately, pulling you closer with a hand that found its way to the back of your neck, fingers pressing against the skin that made you shiver. You deepened the kiss, your hands treading in his messy green curls. Taking him closer, he groaned softly. You felt your heart skip a beat at the sound. Everything else faded away. His room, his textbooks, the world outside, the door, it was just you and him lost in the moment. But, just as things started to heat up, you heard a soft click from behind the door. Before you could even process it, the door swung open. Ah! I'm so sorry. I didn't... Inko, Izuku's mother, stood there, wide-eyed and blushing, her hands clutching a pile of folded clothes to her chest. She squealed, immediately backing away from the door. I should have knocked. I didn't. Oh, dear. You and Izuku both froze, eyes wide with panic. The shock of the situation made you pull away from him quickly, both of you now red as tomatoes, as the door slammed shut with a soft thud. A beat of silence passed between the two of you, before you both scrambled to stand up from the bed, both utterly, completely mortified. Oh my god, you breathed in, hands running through your hair in disbelief. That did not just happen. Izuku was in a similar state of shock, his hands rubbing his face in embarrassment. I can't believe that just happened. My mom, I didn't, oh no. You couldn't even explain what you were feeling. You were so embarrassed. But you laughed a little bit. You couldn't help it. It was a nervous laugh, one that came from sheer awkwardness. I think we need to hide forever, you muttered, shaking your head. This is so embarrassing, I'm gonna die. Izuku made a muffled noise of agreement, pacing back and forth, which was the only way he could think. She's gonna think, oh gosh, she's gonna think we were... He trailed off, unable to find the words. I need to go talk to her. You nodded in agreement, though you still felt like you were burning. Okay, but maybe we should, give her a few minutes to, calm down? Izuku thought quickly. Swallowing hard, he grabbed his hoodie off the chair and pulled it on, trying to give himself a little composure. Yeah, you're right. She probably needs a moment to process it. Meanwhile, you tried to collect your thoughts. The moment had been so intense. Everything felt like a whirlwind. There was no way you could ever look that sweet little lady in the eye after that. You felt like you needed to crawl into a hole and just stay there. After what felt like an eternity of silence, you both stood at the opposite sides of the room, awkwardly shifting on your feet, unsure what to say. Your gaze landed on the desk to where your open notebook still laid. You reached over, distractedly trying to focus on the problem in front of you. Though nothing made sense anymore, the awkwardness hung in the air. Suddenly, the door creaked open again and you both froze. Inko's soft voice filtered through the room. Her tone was gentle but still had a little bit of embarrassment. She peeked her head around the door, her face flushed with color. Izuku, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. I got distracted from the laundry and I forgot to knock. I didn't mean to barge in. You could feel the awkward tension thick in the air. Izuku's face was bright red. As he met his mother's gaze, he followed suit, avoiding eye contact with the both of them. As best as you could, but you couldn't look either of them in the eye without wanting to melt to the floor. It's fine, Mom, Izuku said. His voice was shaky. We're okay. He shot you a look. His eyes were apologetic, and you could tell he was just as mortified as you. Inka smiled, though her cheeks were still tinged with embarrassment. Oh, thank goodness. I didn't mean to interrupt anything personal. I just thought you should know I just thought I'd let you know that lunch was ready when you both wanted to come down. She paused, looking between you and Izuku. And, I'm very happy you both are getting along so well, so don't worry about me, alright? You blinked at her in confusion, then realized what she meant. She was trying to act like everything was normal, but with the way she was squirming in place, it made it clear that she was embarrassed as you were. Izuku cleared his throat before looking at you and then back at his mother. Yeah, we'll be down, Mom. Inko nodded quickly, then gave the both of you a soft, understanding smile. Okay, I'll leave you two alone then, but take your time. No rush. With that, she gave a small sweet wave and closed the door behind her, leaving the two of you alone again. The silence that followed was neither awkward nor silent, at least. Neither of you really moved or spoke, just kind of standing there. Ezekiel was the first to break the silence. So, that was unexpected. You looked at him and nodded slowly. Yeah, you think? He chuckled nervously. I'm sorry about my mom. I didn't expect that. You laughed, your face tinged with embarrassment. Honestly, I don't think I'll ever recover. I'm just gonna pretend it never happened forever. And I think that's a good idea. Izuku agreed, his shoulders slumping as he laughed. Maybe we should just never talk about it again. You giggled. Yeah, I think that's good. Izuku smiled sheepishly. But just so you know, I really like you, Ayan. I think you're amazing, and you looked up at him, your heart skipping a beat. I like you too, Izuku. You admitted, your voice soft, still embarrassed. I really, really do.